Thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Ben Heller, the Chief Technology Officer at Driver Technologies and co-founder. Ben is working on Driver, which is a hardware-free mobile app that allows users to video record their trip while receiving innovative computer vision and telematics-based audio alerts when they are at risk of hitting a car, motorcycle, pedestrian, or cyclist, or if they're falling asleep at the wheel or becoming distracted behind the wheel as well. Ben, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to hear about what you're working on. What are the different kind of decisions you've had to make kind of along the process, especially as a technology guy. I always like to dive into what it really takes to build these intelligent platforms and applications that we sometimes take for granted, but there's such intricacies about the way the technology works and affects us that I think sometimes we just don't know. And so it'll be awesome to dive into that. So before we get into all that fun stuff, what were you doing before you started Driver?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I've enjoyed a career for about 15 years in a variety of spaces that gave me exposure to everything, the entire stack. I started off in the agency side, which is a great way to cut your teeth. If you want to learn how to do something, work for an agency. It's not a relaxing lifestyle, but through the process of just saying yes to all these different projects, you learn a little bit about database development, web development, app development. Was dipping in and out of a lot of different startups, helping them build their MVPs and actually seeing over and over again what it took to get going in that very first step of the process. Went from there and became kind of enamored with that to wanting to do my own startup. So in 2011, I co-founded a medical care coordination company called Cureatr. Got to actually be really at the ground level there, help actually bring on the CTO who's still there, moving the company forward. Ducked back out into the agency world, back into software again, worked as director of software for a company called Arccos Golf, which was a connected hardware play in the golf space, doing machine learning to understand how to advise people really how they should play the sport and educate themselves on how to best do that. And most recently, I was principal engineer at a company called Plex TV, which started off as a home media, kind of media, movie, TV, music streaming company that's now in kind of the ad-supported space with a lot of these folks that you might see embedded on your TV, like Tubi and Pluto. So I've kind of alternated between software management, product side, and actual just hardcore engineering.
Yeah, what's your favorite part of the process?
Oh boy. Honestly, I love feeling like I can build as fast as I can think. So I'm a big fan of prototyping. I love prototype-driven development because I want to see in a 360-degree way how the whole thing is going to work, even if parts of it are mocked, even if it's totally slim. Having that whole vision encapsulated as something that you can then play with is the best way to learn where the weak spots are, what's worth investing in, and what you should just set aside for another project that feels kind of out of scope.
Yeah. Well, your current company or even the company that you've been a part of and worked on, your other projects, when you talk about the prototyping concept, is that you kind of create a whole version of whether it's a piece of technology or software and then ship it out, collect feedback and then iterate into a new version? Or are you testing and doing all the subsequent updates along the way? Is it one or the other, or does it incorporate kind of both?
It's really both. I mean, you want to prototype internally. You want to be able to kind of see and touch and feel the thing because ultimately internal meetings, if you're just talking about a concept, it doesn't go nearly as far as being able to play with it, touch it, and actually utilize it. So internally, we have a whole section of our app called Driver Labs, where we test out these brand new features. That's, really, really cutting edge. There's compromises. Piece of it might not be ready for prime time, but it lets us see, where we can go with the product. And then we give users access to that. So we can have people driving with our app, interacting with these new features. And it lets us really engage deeply with, okay, what's the next thing that we're going to build in a very data-driven way?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned having such I think just such a wealth of experience in the agency realm, building MVPs, building versions of products and dipping your toes into so many parts of the development process. What does it take? You said you learned about what it takes to build and get an application off the ground. What are some things that we might not know or consider when, taking up an application? I think a lot of people think,
I think a lot of times when you're looking at a brand new product, people are trying to insert themselves into a piece of the process where there isn't currently a pain point. You have an idea, you think that you can maybe participate in some part of a flow that already exists and say, hey, I'm going to be an intermediary in this process. And the most important thing in prototyping, initial product development, is understanding a pain point that someone, or hopefully yourself, feels really, really deeply, because nothing can compel a product forward like frustration-driven development. You should feel frustrated. And if you feel frustrated, that's a sign of success, because now you have a problem that you're highly motivated to be able to solve. And so in the case of Driver, we understood the frustrations of driving with a hardware dash cam and setting that up and not being able to get the video up to the cloud and having to pull out a SIM card, load it onto your computer and try to email to somebody. There's just so much frustration in the current ecosystem that we were able to come in and provide a solution to a real problem, not an imagined problem. And that to me is really the most important piece of that initial ideation process.
Yeah. I mean, you've what so many founders have told me before, which is really focus on the problems and something that people are actually, rather than building something that you think people will use, or you have a, highly thought out hypothesis, it doesn't work until people are actually actively using it. And you're seeing the feedback you're getting and then iterating on ways to make it that much more honed into the problem that you're trying to solve. What inspired the conception of the Driver application? You're in so many different, industries, working on different technology before. What about this problem? What got you excited, and what inspired the idea to, build something that was going to help people with, I would say driver safety. I mean, it also helps in, I'm sure, with like litigation process, if people do get into an accident and making sure that they're, less affected by it. What was the inspiration behind the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to give our CEO, Rashid, the credit for this one. He was, working actually at a VC firm. He was kind of helping fund startups and was really seeing it from the other side of the fence. And he started understanding that a lot of what we were hearing about the future of autonomous cars and car safety was this big bluff. Nobody was going to actually deliver this. And this was back in around 2016 when Elon Musk was going on Twitter saying, hey, we're going to have self-driving cars in 2 years, 5 years. He saw right through it. And the idea was, well, even when this comes, it's going to be available to wealthy people in wealthy markets, in and around San Francisco, New York City, very US centric. So he started asking himself the question, like, how can we democratize car safety? How can we actually put it in the hands of everyone globally? And the answer is that even in developing nations, a lot of people have access to Android phones. And, in the US, it happens to be more iOS centric. But even so, cell phones are just ubiquitous. And so if you can take the technology that we have on us every day and then use that to join it with this, legacy hardware, effectively dumb cars, the sitting in the back of your parents' minivan, there wasn't any place to plug in your phone. But if you have a phone, you can mount it and you can turn that car into something that's incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent, and actually gives you actionable information about how to drive safer right there in that moment for everybody, whether you're on, a 5-lane highway or a dirt road. And so that was really his vision. And, I had the honor to be able to kind of brainstorm and talk to him about that throughout that whole process while I was still working as an engineer at other companies. Yeah. And, when I saw that he was so committed to this mission-driven concept of actually improving car safety for everyone amidst the chaos of a pandemic, I'd started a new family. I just couldn't say no to the idea that maybe someday, my son wouldn't have to learn how to drive. And so that's really the inspiration for Driver and the ecosystem that we've built around car safety and accountability.
That's incredible. And I love how you've kind of taken, a prehistoric technology, like, a car that runs on gasoline nowadays, right? And a technology that is so, I think it's hand in hand with everyone's personal experience, which is their mobile device. And now I think everybody can mount their phone. There's so many qualities to what you're doing that really incorporates what I like to think is like low barriers to entry in terms of using this product, which is incredible. And it's hard for a lot of companies to do because you don't have to add another piece of hardware to your life. How does the app work? Like if I'm a driver and I want to, start, recording my whether I'm an Uber driver, whether I'm a regular driver in in like a place like San Francisco, which I'm sure we all know how terrible the traffic is, or right now I'm in Los Angeles and it's even worse, which I didn't think it was possible. But how do I access the app? What are the steps to getting onboarded? And then what are the benefits that I receive when I'm using the application?
Yeah. So I mean, you nailed it in terms of being low barrier to entry. That's what we really focus on. So yeah, we're lucky to be the highest rated, most reviewed, kind of top search result for dash cam in the iOS App Store. So people find us organically. You can go search for it. The app gets downloaded. It's on your phone. You open it and you're ready to drive. That's it. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to do anything. And it's just right there, a big red record button. You put your phone, you mount it in the car. For me, before I had this app, I was already driving with my phone mounted because I used it for mapping. I used it for music. And so there was zero behavioral change as a consumer. And now I just put the same phone up in the same place it's always been, and it records all of my drives. And in the process of doing that, we're providing a lot of value. In this most baseline aspect, it's accountability, right? What if something happens? What if I need to prove that I wasn't at fault in an accident? What if something crazy happens and I just want to show my friends? So record everything that's happening around you just in case. Yeah. And it gives me that level of comfort as I'm driving. Secondarily, there's real-time safety. So if I'm distracted or drowsy, I'm going to get an audio alert that's actually going to wake me up and help me with safety as I'm operating the vehicle. Yeah. Same with forward collision alerts. We're rolling out kind of our next generation of forward collision alerts that includes more nuanced behaviors like understanding tailgating, for example.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's kind of this education component of if I can look at all of my drives after the fact, see where there was hard braking or hard acceleration, harsh turning, near miss accidents, and actually get kind of what we call a driver score that lets me know relative to other drivers or the best I could possibly drive, where am I at? How do I improve that over time? And all of that really kind of comes right out of the box with the product. We've put certain features behind what we now call Driver Premium, which is a subscription tier, which is either the stuff that is, brand spanking new and we're just kind of rolling it out and want to work with a really core group of users, or it's things that have a little bit more cost in terms of development time and operation for us that we want to make sure that we have covered from a business perspective. But we found that people who use the app, they love it. They're really, really excited about being more and more invested in kind of this driving ecosystem and wanting to have cloud storage indefinitely for all of your videos, just in case 6 months later, someone comes and says, hey, there was an issue here. Well, you've got proof. So that's that we've really found it hasn't been a hard product to explain why it's valuable, because driving is, for most people, the most dangerous activity that we engage in on a regular basis. So,
I love that it's a product that, you don't have to convince anyone of its, impact, both positively and also just, I think it's almost necessary nowadays with how many variables everyone deals with. I think even after COVID, the number of accidents skyrocketed through the roof because people were out of practice. And then, those are safety concerns. One thing that you said that really fascinated me about the intelligence of the application, and if you could speak a little bit about how the technology works, and maybe either from a high level or even from a low level standpoint, is how it is intelligently, whether it's measuring distance from another car or how does it know that you're falling asleep or you're drowsy? Is it measuring your, you being within a certain lane, or is it looking back at you, also looking out and seeing your behavior changes? What's behind that technology? It's so fascinating. It seems almost too good to be true in a lot of ways because I think a lot of people think about, other kind of more intelligent cars, like say for a Tesla, right? It's got a lot of different sensors that allow kind of radar to measure distances and uses, less, I guess, more sophisticated technology than you would think is in a cell phone. But here you're telling us that, it actually does everything that those cars are doing. And also focuses on your safety. So we'd love to learn more about the technology around that.
Awesome. Yeah. I like to tell people that what we do is everything up to the point where we're sending instructions back to the car. And so in order to do that, you have to have a really holistic understanding of what is good driving behavior, what's bad driving behavior, and how do we identify it. We're really fortunate in being a software company that we inherit the potential of all of the hardware that we run on, and everything that we do is designed to be adaptive to that. So you're going to get great safety features if you're on a $100 Android phone. You're going to get those same great safety features if you're on the newest iPhone, but they might just run at a slightly different frame rate. And so that's actually how we're able to put a lot of really sophisticated technology and computer vision models in every app that we ship, is we understand the capabilities of the device and scale them to that. So we're looking at every camera that we can have access to. Not every phone gives us access to interior and exterior cameras at the same time. And it's up to the user to decide whether they want to turn those features on and off. There might be privacy reasons why they don't want to have us engage with the interior camera at all. And we always want to respect that. So from the very beginning, we give everyone who downloads our app kind of full range of choice in terms of what they activate, where their camera is pointing, and whether those safety features are on or off. We want to make sure at a baseline level, we're never distracting the driver, right? That's our mission.
Yeah.
And so we want to provide, a full control for what's best for you. But let's say you wanted to go for it, you turn everything on and you just want the full feature set. So in that case, we're recording exterior, optionally recording interior. Even if we decide we don't want to record interior, we can still use the interior camera. And what we do is we actually take a full facial mesh and we understand head tilt, head direction, and where your eyes are actually focused and whether they're open or closed. And so falling asleep is easy to detect. If you're reaching for something in the back seat for a prolonged period of time, we can detect that as well. We can also draw comparisons between what's happening in the interior of the vehicle and what's happening on the exterior of the vehicle. So for example, if we know that there's a pedestrian in your lane, because we're running vision models that classify objects, and we're also running segmentation models that have areas for drivable, non-drivable in different lanes, then we can say there's a pedestrian in your lane at a certain distance. And we know that you don't see that pedestrian because we know that you're not looking outside your windshield. And we know that due to the sensors on the phone, we've got an accelerometer, we've got gyroscope, we've got GPS locations, that you're not braking. That's a really clear indicator that you don't see that person, and we need to alert you and say, hey, there's a person in the lane, please brake. And we do that through an audible beep. But if we know that you're paying attention and we see that you're slowing down already, then that means that you're doing what you need to be doing anyways. We shouldn't bother you, and we're not going to alert in that case. And so we really have everything firing on all cylinders in terms of running computer vision models on both interior and exterior camera feeds, if that's what the experience that you're looking for in the vehicle at the same time that we're recording.
Was this technology around, say, 5 years ago, or is a lot of this newer technology that's being implemented and being kind of iterated on day and day? And it seems like such cutting edge, information that you're mapping together to give an overall kind of experience, but also, to collect the data in the physical world and then to interpret it and give your, give your user that information. Is this all new data, or is this all new technology, or is this something that has been around that it just hasn't been cleverly, puzzled together or quilted together?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're doing anything that hasn't been attempted before, but it's a little bit of a right place, right time, in so much as the hardware is now able to support a lot of the functionality that previously you would see issues with overheating for devices that were left on a hot dashboard. We've also in part solved some of the challenges that previous people in this space have kind of hit and then abandoned going down this line with software. So we actually developed our own hardware dash mount that not only has a heatsink, but also a cooling fan in it that will allow us to run the phone a little hotter than it would be in just a kind of traditional mount. And so we've taken some creative solutions to be able to really invest in this approach. And because of that, we're able to keep this very low barrier to entry aspect to the platform that I think lives up to the original vision of helping democratize car safety. If we were to go to something that was a fancy hardware device that was bespoke, we'd be really drifting away from that vision. So that's given us the clarity to decide to solve some of the hard problems in this space that others haven't really gotten past.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It seems like companies kind of fork into a few different directions. One, they'll go into a direction where they do add more sophisticated hardware and kind of create kind of a new alternative future based on, updated new technology. Or they kind of maintain their vision of keeping their core value of keeping their technology accessible and, optimally easy to onboard and integrate into, your day-to-day life, which is fascinating that you've been able to do that in so many different ways. And that the only piece of hardware really is just to support, the cooling of your device, which is incredible. You mentioned something about, having the ability to store all this information into a driver cloud that lets you kind of go through a catalog of different drives that you've been on. What is done with that information? I'm always curious about data, and nowadays we're always sensitive to what our data is, it being used for doing. What's your philosophy behind storing data, using data, and are you offering it to different parties to get more information or kind of share information to make other businesses have more success? I'm always curious about kind of where data is used, stored, and if you're giving access for some benefit or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, our driver cloud solution is for the person who's driving with the app.
Yeah.
We realized pretty quickly when you're recording HD video, you're going to fill up your phone pretty quick. And if you need to have a long trail of videos for accountability reasons, say you're a rideshare driver, you don't know if a report's going to be filed a day after a drive or weeks or even months, you need to have a permanent repository for that. So we want to have a home for all of the data for our drivers so that they can keep their phones nice and slim and still functioning and not stocked with days and days of dash cam footage. So we have an auto delete feature that allows videos to be uploaded to the cloud and then removed from the local device. And with absolute certainty that everything is stored there remotely. We realize in this space, right, we're collecting pretty sensitive information potentially, whether that's outside the vehicle or inside the vehicle. And so we wanted to bake a notion of privacy and data access right into the kind of the fundamental fabric of how we do this. And so we've built a system where you control who has access and why to your data, whether that's your family or it's your boss or maybe your insurer. So by default, you can say, all right, I have a family org, and this is my wife, myself, my 2 children. And when you create that organization, you can say, here's what I have access to. I'm not going to see what's happening outside your car all the time, but I am going to get your locations, for example. And the person who's giving permission actually has to agree to those terms and say, I allow the person who's my org administrator to have access to my location. And so through a combination of kind of variability in terms of data access and then transparency, you can allow people to create a platform where you share exactly what you want to who you want. And at the point at which you want to revoke that, you can do so. So we allow even public share links. For example, let's say you got in an accident and you want to send a report to the police or to your insurer. You can just create a share link that lets you send that to that person. And when you're no longer want to give them access to the drive and all of the drive details, you can just revoke that share link. And so those are the types of features that we're trying to bake into the platform.
Yeah.
We also use the platform for just understanding driving behavior more generally. In order to provide the kind of alerts that we do on the edge, we have to know, okay, what does driving look like in a good and worst case scenario?
Yeah.
And so the types of studies that we do and when we work with industry partners is something like, all right, we want to look at the average latency between the brake lights of the car in front of us activating and then the time it takes for a human driver in a tailing vehicle to hit the brakes. So in order to do that study, we don't need to know anything about you or who you are or where you are. And we don't even need to see what's happening in the rest of the scene. We just need to know that brake lights activated from metadata, and we need to know the deceleration curve. And so we do try to understand driving behavior data, but we do it in a way that's very, very sensitive to the context in which we need to study something very particular.
Incredible. Tell us a little bit about shifting away from technology, which I can just ask loads of questions for forever on how it works. It's so fascinating, technology once you really get into the weeds of it. But shifting away from that, tell us a little bit about the traction. How many users are using your application? what are the positive results that you've seen in terms of driver safety, and any other kind of measurables that you're really proud of as a company that have seen a lot of growth and success? Give us some numbers that really excite you and continue to push you every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've seen hundreds of thousands of downloads. We have tens of thousands of monthly active users. What I love to see is people who use the app every day who aren't professional drivers. That makes me really excited. When someone who's a commuter, is saying, "Hey, I use your app every morning and I use your app every evening. And, it's actually saved me from potentially having to pay out on an insurance claim where somebody was pointing a finger at me and I was able to hold up the app and say, you know what, here's what actually happened." That makes me proud to do what we do. When we can actually say we're helping people on a daily basis, whether that's, because you're a professional driver or just something's happened to happen on the road and we're able to catch it. That's what we're here for. And as a mission-driven company, my ultimate goal is to be able to have a stat on our website that is number of collisions avoided because of driver. And I think we're pretty close to having a notion of that, to understand the number of times that our collision alert system has gone off, a driver's taken corrective action, and we can say, all right, if maybe we hadn't alerted, something could have happened. That's kind of where I want to go in terms of feeling like we're making people safer on the roads. And so the stats for number of active users and downloads and number of reviews are all wonderful, but what really matters is life saved. I think as a company, that's our priority.
Yeah. You mentioned something to me, I think it was in the form that you filled out as, things that make your company unique. One of them was about, being a mission-driven company and creating this culture around, what that mission is. Tell us a little bit about not only the culture, but, how you maintain, a strong culture in a remote working environment, because I think, it's easy to do it with camaraderie, work events and brainstorming sessions, but I think it's difficult to find the balance between, letting your employees, get the work done that they want to, and they can kind of have their own lives, but also creating this cohesive, organism really that functions towards one direction and one goal and is accountable for the different, responsibilities that they have. Tell us a little bit about how you've been able to do that at Driver.
Sure. So the promise I make to every engineer when they start working here is that they'll have the opportunity to write the best code of their entire careers at Driver. And that's a tall order, but I think so far we've lived up to it. We do this through a combination of allowing people to solve a completely unique challenge. It's something that you can't look up on Stack Overflow, right? And in order to do that, you need to be given the time to go both really deep in your field of choice and also really broad across the whole range of technologies that we work with. Chances are, if you spent your whole career in DevOps, you don't know a lot about computer vision. Or if you're a machine learning expert, maybe you want to go learn some Elixir on the server side. We try to foster a whole community around just being very trusting, being very open with our own education, and having appreciation for what the other people on the team do every day. And, that's kind of had a lot of trickle down effects in terms of how we structure our onboarding. We only do contract to hire so that everybody has an opportunity to meet anyone new coming onto the team bi-directionally, so that there's a really, really great fit in terms of cultural fit and the technologies that they want to work with. We don't have a product org or project managers. So a lot of our product decisions are all done from a bottom-up approach. It's very, as much as possible, egalitarian in terms of decisions being made by the people who are going to be writing the code and interacting with customers. And so this is how the team's begun to kind of shape up. And through a lot of these different interactions and decisions, it means that, we have a I think pretty strong relationship that can get you through the ups and downs of being a startup, as you well know, right? It's not all smooth sailing.
No, it's not. And it's definitely, a function of the team that really allows you to, go through those challenges or even shift responsibilities when you feel like you've been doing either the same thing or what you've been doing maybe hasn't given you the results you wanted to. It's that those micro changes that allow you to grow not only as an individual, but also as a company. What are some of the biggest challenges that Driver faces today?
Yes. I mean, it's there's a lot of challenges, but I would say the biggest challenge is that, the industry is moving at a remarkable rate. And by the industry, I just mean automotive, generally speaking, but there's a lot of different pieces to this, right? We're slowly making cars that drive themselves. How do we insure those cars? How do we get them on the road? How do we get past all the regulatory challenges of being able to do this safely and in a way that, operates with all the systems that we've built so far? What does the next generation of kind of these OEM platforms look like for people to build software that integrates with the cars themselves? Understanding how all of these different tendrils within the space are moving forward and at what rates and where to situate our company in the middle of that is really interesting, because we touch a lot of the edges. And probably the biggest risk is that the industry moves so quickly, it moved past the need for a mobile app like ours, which is fundamentally a kind of transitional product that connects the old world with the new world. And for us, knowing how and when to embed ourselves in that new world. So part of the way that we've kind of insured ourselves against that future is, we build our app effectively as an SDK. And it's a layer of code wrapping core functionality that could actually be embedded in infotainment systems and vehicles themselves. So, I'd love to see a future where we actually power the vehicles and can at the same time, if you don't have a vehicle with those capabilities, still let you mount your phone and still stay true to that original vision of running on as many technologies as possible to give everyone access to that. So it's kind of stretching in both directions, but that's also the biggest risk for us.
Yeah. What's, if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Driver?
This is really fanciful, but I'll just go for it. I'd love to see a future where I sit down in an autonomous vehicle and I plug in my phone, and that phone has on it a profile of my entire history of driving as an individual and understands how I drove and lets me actually drive in a car that's driving itself in a way that I would have driven it. I love that concept, and it's actually not so crazy based on just understanding all the little nuances of how it would tend to navigate certain types of roads and situations. So I'd love to be able to usher in a future where having a car that drives me feels just as natural as me driving myself.
I love that. It reminds me of the movie I, Robot, when Will Smith's character takes over the car, and then they're all automated and they're moving at such a high rate, but also it's like this. It is actually an interesting relationship between the car and the person, and this use of technology that's very unique to the individual. So that just splashed that scene when he takes over the car in the highway and kind of sick of it driving itself. But it's so fascinating. I know we're close to time here, and I always like to ask this question, one for selfish research, but also for my audience as well, to gain some gems of knowledge. What are some, whether it's books or people who have influenced you the most, either, in your past, and while you're growing in your career, or currently now, that inspire you as you move forward and build Driver?
Yeah. Boy, I was a liberal arts major, so this is a pretty dangerous question to ask with little time remaining. We could do a whole episode on this one, but I can tell you what I'm reading right now. What's sitting on my coffee table downstairs, which is there's a 20th century economist, E.F. Schumacher. He has a book called Small is Beautiful, which is basically about how to grow without actually scaling and succumbing to the fallacy of bigger is better. And so what does growth mean if you're not measuring growth by the definition of more? And I think about that a lot in terms of growing a company. How many people do we need to execute on our vision? What is our vision? And having that clarity and continuously asking that question. And then sort of similar to that, I've been really intrigued by a paper on something called digital sufficiency. There's a European academic called Tilman Santarius. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly. I think he's German. But it's on a similar theme of trying to get at the core of how we can build technology with the smallest possible footprint and environmental impact. And that's maybe surprising, I guess, given that we're talking about big data and driving, but that's actually makes it all that more important, which is that big data and driving are not things you think of as being economical and sustainable. And I think part of the reason that I actually really believe in Driver is because I believe that our team can help usher in a future in both of those respects that is safer and more sustainable. So tackling tricky problems head on, I guess, is the topic of my reading material right now.
I love it. It's beautiful, man. I really appreciate kind of diving into not only your background and experience and what led you to driver, but what innovative things you're working on and how drivers kind of creating a future that benefits and really like directly benefits its user, which, it's tricky with a lot of technology because I think there's a lot of input that the user has to do to then get the outcome they need. And it's like, one step back, but two step forward versus I think, what you're working on is really just moving forward in a really positive direction, which is so exciting to see. And I definitely am going to download the app now. Yeah, I'm a
Please
little
do,
afraid
yeah.
I'm a little afraid of my driver rating because I'm big through shuffling to playlists. So that might take me down a few notches, but excited to see the technology. Last little bit before we end here is where can we support Driver? Where can we find you? Give us your plugs, your LinkedIn's, your website, your Twitters. Where can we be a part of the vision and get to know more about the technology and what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said the best place is our brand new website. We just launched it, and we've got a bunch of new pages coming soon. It goes into really everything we're doing as a company, from how to keep you safe to kind of the science of driving. So that's drivertechnologies.org. Check us out. That'll link you out to all of the other stuff that we're doing. So
Incredible. Well, Ben, thank you for being on the show. I really hope you enjoyed yourself, and we'll definitely have to have a version 2 of the episode, in the near future. I'm close to hitting 100 episodes. So after that, I think there's a core amount of people, and I'd love for you to be in that core to touch base again and talk about some more cool things and that you're working on and technology as a state. But Ben, I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you for being on the show.
I love that. Thank you so much. You're asking all the right questions. And I think what you're doing here is super valuable. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.